If we tell them about ourselves all the time, we're competing with our client for that hero spot. So instead, when we tell stories, we make the client or prospect the hero, and we show them how we're going to help them get from where they are to where they want to be with us as their guide.
From a logical perspective, because the medicine that we practice is so different, people need to see data that allows them to feel like their heart made the right decision, because
that's right.
There's a connection between the heart and the mind. And so,
Absolutely.
we've all been fooled by this emotional experience in our heart.
What's so crazy to me in the very best way is when I talk to founders in other industries, it's the same. It's all the same. It's like that thread of people connecting with people, of how powerful story is, of finding, somebody who has a unique ability and can be the guide for you.
Hello, everybody. It's Regan Archibald, your host of Unreasonable Health. And I'm so excited today to bring to you the founder of the podcast Billion Dollar Backstory, Stacy Havener. She's not only a really amazing human, she's in my strategic coach group. So she brings a wealth of information for all you entrepreneurs out there. You're going to want to listen to this because she's going to show you some ways that she tapped into $1 billion industry without the analytical and data-driven, number-driven world that most people swim in that industry. And so I'm really excited to have her on because she brings heart into capitalism. And many of you have heard me say, I love capitalism. I think it's a really amazing methodology. It's the way that we can all connect and add value to society, and it's the scorekeeper. And so what Stacy's going to do is show you how she added enormous amounts of value to society in her own unique way. So Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be here. And I'm psyched. I mean, even when you do the intro, I'm like, gosh, yes, let's do this. It's going to be so good.
Yeah, it is going to be good because, you grew up in a blue collar family, and, you had a literature degree, you have, a love for words. And I remember when we were talking, you and I met in Chicago, I think at a dinner, and we were in a coach workshop together. And Ben Laws, our mutual friend, was like, you got to meet Stacy. She's the coolest girl. And she's been she does the most amazing things. And so, anyone who Ben has introduced me to has always been a very positive experience. So tell us about your story. I mean, because you're in a male-dominated industry that's obsessed with numbers, and you completely turned it upside down.
Yes, that's a perfect summary. So, I'm Stacy Havener. As you said, I'm the founder and CEO of a sales and marketing agency called Havener Capital. And as Regan mentioned, one of the things we do is we also have a podcast called Billion Dollar Backstory. In my career, I've raised over $8 billion. That's led to $30 billion in follow-on AUM for investment boutiques against some incredible odds, and in one of the toughest boys clubs, Wall Street. Wow. Now, on paper, none of that makes any sense. Because as you said, Regan, I'm a blue collar kid from a working class town who got the wrong degree from the wrong school. And I'm a woman. I never saw myself in the investment world. To be honest, I actually wanted to be a college professor in literature. I was a writer, a poet, a storyteller, but I paid my way through university, and I was going to have to pay my way through grad school. My high school soccer coach, if you can believe this, had stayed in touch with me. I was local, and he ran $1 billion small cap equity boutique, and he was launching a new fund, and he offered me a job. He said, you can come work here, help me launch the fund, you save some money, and then you can go back to grad school. I never left the industry. I helped him launch the fund. We raised 500 million in 2 years. Then I raised 3 billion in 3 years for a $17 million fund, and so on and so forth. But what's crazy is that, as you said, this is an industry full of men who love numbers, and there was a place for a girl who loved words. I didn't know I was doing anything special. It took me a few more years to realize that I was doing something that was really difficult for other people. Raising money for startups and new funds is very challenging. And it probably took me another 10 years to unpack what I was actually doing. And at the heart of it was storytelling. I think in every industry, even the investment industry, people do business with people. Yeah. And so today I'm lucky to lead the team at Havener, where we help investment boutiques grow using that narrative-led sales and marketing system. And as we chatted about in the green room, if you will, I'm also pretty excited to be able to help founders in different industries tap into the power of their story and how to use that to shape their success.
Yeah, because think about how many of you have done business with someone simply because you know, like, and trust the person. Totally. And the way that we know, like, and trust people is because we connect with their story, and something happens in the brain, the mirroring impact. When you hear a story, you automatically put yourself into that person's worldview. And then you're like, I love Stacy's world. It looks really captivating, or it's not really the world I want to swim in. You make a choice based on that. And then no matter how much logic someone tries to apply on you, it's usually futile, is what I've noticed.
100%. And I think what's challenging is in an industry that really is highly intellectual, esoteric, numbers-based, the language, like if someone said to me that the language that a fund manager speaks is numbers. That is the language that, as you said, it's a scorecard. It's an objective way of measuring. And so for me to come in and say, I get that, when you are pitching, you're aiming at the investor's head. And I'm going to tell you that that's a mistake because the heart buys first and you're skipping it. The heart buys first and the brain rationalizes that decision. Yeah. That's a human thing. That's just how humans make decisions. And it seems too simple sometimes for people who are really, really smart. They're like, that can't be right. And it's like, no, that is right. Because that's human nature. You want to, as you said, you want to do business. In order to do something, you have to feel something first. That's the order. That's the order. Yeah.
Do something, you got to feel something. Yeah. Roy Williams, I was just at the Wizard Academy. We hosted a longevity retreat there in Austin. And he's just like a poet. And he said, when you open the hearts, the minds will follow. And he started this talk. He said, when you open the hearts, the minds will follow. When you open the hearts, the minds will follow. And then his whole story was all about how that works in every aspect of life.
It's so true. And it makes me, you at the beginning, you said something that I really want people to hear, which is when you make the decision to do business with someone, there's that know, like, and trust framework. I want to tell even like a little story about that. Yeah. So, okay, when we're all going to be better storytellers when we leave this podcast, myself included, because it's a daily practice. So when you're telling stories, you are not the hero of the story. Okay. Most of the stories you tell, there's one important one that we're going to come back to in a minute, but most of the stories you tell, your client or prospect is the hero and you are the guide. So if you think about movies, there's only one hero. So like, in Hunger Games, Katniss is the hero. Yeah. Haymitch is the guide. Star Wars, the hero is, I'm not a Star Wars fan, Luke Skywalker. Is that right? Yeah, thank you. Good. Yep. Okay. And Yoda is the guide, right? So the stories we tell, if we tell them about ourselves all the time, which is what typically happens in a pitch, guess what we're doing? We're competing with our client for that hero spot. So instead, when we tell stories, we make the client or prospect the hero, and we show them how we're going to help them get from where they are to where they want to be with us as their guide. Okay. So almost all the stories we teach are structured that way. But there's one story that you are the hero of. And you're the only one that can be the hero of it. And that's your backstory. So that's like what I told you on the podcast, right? Like, here's who I am.
Yeah.
And here's why the backstory is so important. In the movies, we'll go back to Katniss and Haymitch. Katniss was not presented with a lineup of guides. And she said, okay, like you tell me about you and you tell me about you and I'm going to pick Haymitch. She probably wouldn't have. She was just assigned the guide. So in the movies, the guide is assigned. In real life, we choose the guide. Okay. So the backstory is important because it lets people see you so that they can choose you. And so that's the only story that you are actually the hero of, and you have to be. You need to give people a reason to choose you.
Got it. So let's dive into your backstory a little deeper then. I mean,
I'm going to make you do yours in a minute. So I'll be on the hot seat, but then we're switching.
You go first. You go first, lady.
So, I'm going to tell you, here's what's really interesting about my backstory that I don't know. I just realized this. So in my backstory, I obviously, as a guide, I established that I'm good at what I do, right? I've raised a lot of money, right? And that's the ultimate goal for what these investment boutiques want to achieve. I established that. I also establish what's different. I'm about stories and everyone else is about stats. I think story goes first, stats come second. I think people are more important than the portfolio or your performance. So I'm establishing what makes me different with enough confidence to say, I'm aware this might not be for someone. I'm willing to attract and repel, right? So I'm establishing this is what I stand for. And it's okay if you don't, but we're probably not a good match, right? I'm not the right guide for you. So I establish what's different. And then I tell you a little bit about myself that it's like the why part, the passion part. I tell you that I feel like I don't belong here. That I was not the typical stereotypical finance. I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't get a degree in economics. My parents aren't, ex-Wall Street people. Like, I'm an outsider who made it work, who's successful here.
Wow.
And it's that last piece that is an incredible pull magnet for people to call. Because as it turns out, there are quite a few people who feel like they don't belong on Wall Street. And when they hear that, again, they feel something and it sparks them to do something.
Got it.
So, right? Okay. So are you ready? Can we switch seats? Or wait, I'm happy to answer any questions. You can tell I'm super excited. Yeah.
Because, I mean, in order for you to get good at what you did, like, it's not like you just were successful right out of the gates. I'm sure. Just tell us about like the lowest of the low, like what was finally the bottom where you're like, I got to get my shit together or I've got to get out of here.
Yeah. So here's the thing. What is it like? Basically, there's a quote, but I can't pull it forward. I didn't know anything. I didn't know shit about this business, right? So but I was working for my soccer coach. So he was like my coach in a lot of ways. Now he's my boss, right? So he was my coach on the field. Now he's my boss at work. So I was a good student. I learned a lot, right? And then when it came time to sell, he just like threw me to the wolves. He's like, here's a list and go get some investors. And I think because I didn't know what I was doing, it ended up being a really good thing. Because I did what was my unique ability. I was like, okay, he's just handed me a list and a phone. Yep. So, all right, I'm just going to call up some people and I'm going to ask them about their story, because the list I had happened to be independent RIAs and family offices. How do family offices make their money? Well, they're usually entrepreneurs. They've built some business to a very high level of success. They love to talk about themselves, as does everyone. Sure. So I would ask, they would tell me their story. Then I would tell them about my coach. And then we'd talk about like the fund a bit and they'd invest. Wow. So I thought, okay, this is how it's done. I figured it out. Perfect. Repeat. It keeps working. But like I said in my backstory, it wasn't until other people who were in the biz looked at me and said, what are you doing? Because you shouldn't be raising this money. Nobody invests in a brand new fund. How are you doing this over and over again? And that's when I said, well, I don't know, maybe I'm doing it wrong, right? Yeah. And then I realized there was kind of like there have been low parts which we can talk about, but I think the low was I had no idea what I was doing. and no one told me to do it a certain way. Yeah. But that ended up being the best thing that could have happened for me and for my clients, because I did it different.
Wow. So what's your Colby? You've got a long, quick start, I'm sure.
So I'm like a 5. I just wrote it down when I was prepping. So I'm a 5-4-8-3.
Oh yeah. Okay. So we're twinners. You know, I'm a 4-2-9-3, and yes. We had another strategic coach client in yesterday, Sally, at the longevity retreat. She and I have matching Colby.
Oh, that's cool. Like a twin. Yeah.
A printer. You know, we're almost print twins. Have you done print yet?
I have. I looked at that too. I'm an 8-3.
8-3. Okay.
So I think yours was like, what's yours?
7-8. Yeah. So you want to be strong and self-reliant. Yeah. That's your driver, but you do it through achieving and succeeding, through hitting goals. And okay. Yes. And so my 7 is I just want to enjoy life and have fun.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. I read yours and I'm like, God, that's so good. And mine seems so like
you're so serious, Stacy.
Yeah, I know. Lighten up. Gosh. And so what I think is interesting, so now we've got a little bit of that story framework behind us, and I've talked about my story. And I was sharing with you that here I am at Coach, and like all my friends are clients of Regan. And so obviously, like that's one of, that's a very big behavioral factor in making a decision to work with someone.
Social proof. Yeah.
Social proof. Thank you. But then when I chatted with you at Coach, like on a break, I think I asked you for your backstory, and you shared a little bit of it with me. And there was something in particular, like exactly what we talked about when I was in the hot seat happened when you shared your backstory with me. And can you tell a little bit about what I asked? So we're going to replay this. I asked Regan, how did you get into this? Like, what made you decide that functional medicine and this more East-West, combining those two schools was where you wanted to go? And do you remember what you said?
Well, I don't remember verbatim, but I imagine if I probably told you something like I really just didn't want to be a farmer when I grew up, or a rancher. So
that was part of it. That was part one.
Okay. Yeah. And then because I was, exposed to so many chemicals, I ended up being misdiagnosed by 5 different doctors. And my uncle was a doctor. So I was like, I want to be like Lester J. He's got the boat. He's got soft hands. His clothes are clean. He looks like a human, not like a slave worker. And then it was my own health crisis, where it was finally a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist who ran the right labs and was like, oh, you've got Hashimoto's, you've got a thyroid issue. from your immune system, it's not stress, because that's all I was told is your labs
Mm-hmm.
look normal. You're just stressed. It's all in your head. And I was so frustrated because, this was 25 years ago. And so then I worked with this acupuncturist, naturopathic doctor, went on a gluten-free diet, and everyone was like, what is gluten? No one knew what it was. And I got rid of corn and all these things, and my health started to recover. And so I was like, I don't want to study Western medicine because I'll do the same thing to my patients that happened to me.
Yeah.
So I went and studied integrated medicine at a school in Hawaii, and it was the most reputable kind of integrated school I could find because I was skeptical. I was like, this is not scientific enough. So, because I was like, medicine's about the science, and I still am like that. That's why I called it East West, because I'm like, look, I am just like you. I'm skeptical of so many things that come into my body, but I understand that there's this innate wisdom that has been captured 2,500 years ago. And biology hasn't changed that much. So what worked in the past, a lot of it still works in the present. But also there's this future of medicine and the innovation that I always have brought into my practice. And that's where the Western side comes in. So it's kind of like past, future right there.
I mean, let's just throw our mics down, because that's like mic drop good. Okay. So
how did I do, Stacy? Was that
you did fabulous? You did fabulous.
Is that what I told you before?
That is. It is.
Okay.
So it's authentic. That was a good test. It was a good check if this was and so here's what's super interesting about that. So if we're going to do the same thing we did with mine. So you shared about you as, growing up, you did not want to be a farmer, right? Like
Yep.
my blue collar thing. You shared part of your journey of what makes you a guide. You were misdiagnosed. There are a lot of people listening to that have been misdiagnosed or feel like they still don't know what's wrong, but they know something is. Okay. You shared that you had a thyroid issue. I also have a thyroid issue. So you see that, I might have said, well, I'm choosing to hire Regan because he's really good at what he does. He's helped a lot of people, the social proof, all these things. But the reality is I relate to what it's like to want to do something different than your family. I relate to what it's like to be misdiagnosed for a long time and have it impact your life. And I also have thyroid. So if I'm going to pick a guide out of that lineup, guess who it's going to be? You.
Yeah, pick me. That'd be fun.
That's right.
Right.
So what happens is, and in the investment industry, I'll speak to that because I don't know how it works in the health side, but it's, health is very, as you said, scientific and data and all of these things. Is that what just happened right there is enough for me to make a decision with my heart. I am in. He's the guide. This is what I need in my life. This is what's missing. This is going to help me get from A to B, where I am now, to where I want to go. That is a story. You've invited me in, and you're going to be the person. You're the Yoda that's going to get me where I want to go. And now what's going to happen is, and this is what's happening, I'm going to do all the things, the due diligence things. So I'm going to get my brain into the conversation and make sure it's all right. Like the logic now, like, is it the right structure? What's involved? What do you do? What do I do? What's the cost? All those things. But the bulk of the decision is already done.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't realize is it is that simple. It's not easy, but it is that simple.
That's awesome. Well, and then, we bring in the objective side where we're like, okay, we really want to see some data before we take you on as a client. So
that's right. Then you have
make
to
it too hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I find that, from a logical perspective, because the medicine that we practice is so different, people need to see data that's allows them to feel like their heart made the right decision, because
that's right.
There's a connection between the heart and the mind. And so, we've all been fooled by this emotional experience in our heart. And so even with me, I want to make sure that, hey, I really appreciate you as a human. but let's go through your blood labs and
Yes.
let's do a practice run to make sure that I can work with you, because I'm going to be asking you some questions you won't even know that show, like, is she going to be the type of client that I want to work with or not?
100%. And that's the due diligence that has to happen both ways, right? Because again, the hero chooses the guide different than the movies. Also, the guide chooses the hero, right? Like, also not what happens in the movies, but you get to do that because it's your business. You get to build it your way. And the brain has to be involved. That's the thing. The brain has to get involved. The data, the objective, all of that has to get involved. And now I read a quote this morning and it said, it was basically the idea that like stats lie. Okay. It was basically the idea that like Excel has told more, not lies, than like Microsoft Word. Okay.
Huge.
And that's huge, right? And I think that's true. That's a big knock on narrative in general, is like, oh, it's manipulative. You're trying to manipulate people. And the reality is, if you want to manipulate someone, you can use a lot more things than words. You can use data, you can use stats, you can do all these things. So it's both, right? It's coming from a good place, and it's narrative and numbers together. And I think what's interesting is, we were chatting about this in the green room too, you know, the stories we tell ourselves also really matter. So like, if I'm somebody that really relies on a scorecard and objectivity, and I'm in the investment business, let's say, I get a daily scorecard. If you're competitive, the investment business is great because every day you get a print of how you did. Did I do better than my peers or worse? Did I make money or lose? So this is like, it's addictive. So when we get our labs, like now, I don't know if it was always this way, but my last round of labs, it was like, there was green section that was like good, normal range or whatever. And then it was like, if you out of bounds on the sides, right? Yep. So the labs come in. Do I really look at every number? No, I scan the whole thing and just go, am I in the green?
Yep.
And so I did, scanned it. I'm in the green. I'm like, God, this is like the best my labs have ever looked. I'm killing it right now. Yeah. But is that actually true? Yeah. Because the numbers tell one thing, but there's a narrative to it. And I wonder if you can like speak to that, because I think it's not like I'm telling myself a story if I just look at the numbers and say, oh, everything's great. I don't need Regan. I don't need anything. I'm killing it. My health's perfect.
Yeah, well, and I think you bring up a good point. So functional medicine, what we do is we take those ranges and narrow those down. So what's in the green on most labs, that means that you fit into this bell curve of 90% of the population. So the averages, all they are is averages. And so every lab has their own averages, and every year they adjust the averages based on what the previous year looked like. Have you looked around and seen 90% of people around you healthy? Like, have you traveled lately?
So yeah, it's like, so you don't, maybe you don't want to be in this average group here.
Well, I'm just saying, like, it's green. It's like your doctor is going to say everything looks fine. It's the same story I got. So it's the same Excel spreadsheet where it's like more lies can be told on what's factual versus not, based on who is at the end of that rainbow, who's adjusting and manipulating those numbers. And so what we do is we take the numbers and we narrow those down, because there's what are called optimal levels, and there's predictive values that you can start to see where the biology starts to change internally before symptoms ever show up. So in my schooling, there's a famous quote is basically, I won't say it as poetic as it's written, but it's the low level physician treats symptoms as they arise. The high level physician, he predicts symptoms before they ever become diseases. So really what we're trying to do is be predictive in our analysis. And that requires us to look at numbers totally different, but we also have to be able to put the numbers together. And this is where I've loved working with AI, and I'm working with a software, like some engineers right now, where AI can actually help us take all of this, like, because biology is far more complex than we make it out to be, than what I even think it is. And so if I can have AI helping me, that's where we're going to get better diagnoses faster, give you more predictive qualities. But everybody's using AI just to predict a disease when it's showing up. And I'm going to be using AI to show the disease that will show up in the future. But you have a chance right now to make changes.
So I love that. What a fabulous use of AI. And also another narrative or a story that we're telling ourselves, right? Which you said, like the data is saying one thing, but it's only at the surface. It's got a whole bunch of problems, which is often the case with data. But if you go layer deep and you start, what are the numbers telling you? Now you're getting into more of like that narrative piece. But you said something that I love, which is you have a chance to change it. And I think that's really powerful. So again, like for me, so my mom has a thyroid problem. My grandmother has a thyroid problem. Like this is a generational thing. So I have a choice of what story I'm going to tell myself or write. Either I just say, it's in my genes. I have it. They both treated it with levothyroxine. That's what I'm on. And that's what I'm going to do. That's the story. Or I say, TO, maybe there's a better way, a different way. And maybe I don't have to have it. Maybe this isn't the story I have to have. Like, and then if my daughter gets it, am I just going to say, well, sorry, kiddo, like that's just runs in the family. Like I can choose to write a different story about my health.
Man. Well, and it's so powerful because by looking at the story as well, because life is all stories, from Stacy having her perspective, which but I think it's actually, there's real truth to it. I mean, have you read the book Sapiens?
No.
Adding to love that book.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite books. But it talks about that, we had competitive other types of Homo sapiens, and we had Neanderthals were kind of the last one that Homo sapiens kind of pushed out. But the thing that made us different than the other types of erectus hominoids was due to the fact that we could tell stories better. Fiction.
For real? That's in the book?
No, it's very well. It's one of the most reputable books on anthropology that you'll ever read. Noel Harari. I mean, it's just fascinating, just seeing the explosion of the human brain. But it's our ability to create fiction, and as I learned, like nonfiction is where people get disarmed because they're always looking at things skeptically. When you read fiction, just like you're talking about movie watching, is you have to just engage in the process. You have to let go of that logical, skeptical brain that's here to protect you. And so I just think it's really interesting to dive this deep into this story this thing called stories, because I think it can help change everybody's life. So let me tell you the story on Synthroid real quick.
Yeah.
So when I graduated school, my academic dean, he said, medicine is 25 years behind the research. Don't fall into that category. And this was Dr. Smith. He looked like Einstein, like the white hair and everything.
I love it.
Brilliant doctor. Wrote all these books on cancer and just phenomenal. But if you look at Synthroid, it was a treatment that was established in the late 1940s. So your treatment for your thyroid is literally 75 years old. I mean, I'm just it's a story, right? I'm telling you the story. And what's in Synthroid is cornstarch.
No.
It's a binder. One of the things, so you've got these corn fibers that hold the medication together, but one of the things that triggers more autoimmunity in thyroid, this is what I learned, is when your body has these foods that trigger more antibodies. And so you're basically taking a medication that's going to keep your thyroid from ever performing at its best. And T4 is the inactive version of the thyroid hormone. You need T3. It's got to be broken down in your liver and in your gut. So if you have any issues in your liver, any issues in your gut, you're really just not getting that substance where it needs to go anyways. And so anyway,
Well,
so
that's
that's this.
depressing. So thanks for coming. Thanks for having me on. Let
All
me,
right. Well, if you ever want to come back to the show, just let me know. I've got.
No, but here's the thing. So like that was a story in and of itself. What I
Yeah,
mean, right? That's the backstory, the
that's the
job story of that
backstory.
drug. But
Now you can go and.
now I can go write a different one, which just doesn't involve Synthroid
That's
anymore,
right.
right?
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
but if we know the
exactly.
true stories, and then we can say, wow, that makes so much sense because, yeah, I feel a little bit better on it, but I don't feel that much different. And I could go off Synthroid and not really notice, but I just take it because my doctor says my numbers look better when I take it.
And that's it. So there's so much here. I mean, I think what's interesting to me is, and it happens every time I chat with somebody in another industry. I'm like, I've been amazed at how powerful storytelling has been to raise money in this industry where it shouldn't work. I mean, I shouldn't be successful. Stories shouldn't, like all these reasons. None of it makes any sense, and yet it makes all the sense in the world. What's so crazy to me in the very best way is when I talk to founders in other industries, it's the same. It's
Mm,
all the same. It's like that thread of people connecting with people, of how powerful story is, of finding, somebody who has a unique ability and can be the guide for you. Like that happens everywhere in every business, and it works. It's just
mm.
like I always leave conversations like this. I'm like, damn, stories are great. I'm
They're
like, it's
great.
just
Yeah.
there. It's so powerful.
What would you say, like, because you have your own framework, and if you guys didn't notice, Stacy just took me through the whole thing that she takes founders through. So
I
I'd
did. That was a little
imagine when
mini
you work,
one.
what's
Yeah,
that?
it was a mini one.
Yeah, but I'd imagine when you work with somebody, you have a very successful framework
Yes.
that you've spent, you mentioned you spent the last decade just kind of piecing it out and saying, wow, this is what made it so compelling, where I was able to raise $8 billion. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many of you have an $8 billion company, but essentially, in order to keep the lights on, we're raising funds every day in our
Yeah,
businesses.
that's right.
And so it seems to me like you may be onto something here. So what's the framework? If
Yeah.
you could just give people kind of
Yeah.
like a snapshot of the framework
Sure.
of working with you, the framework of a compelling story, what does that look
Yeah. So we call it the story selling framework, and there's 5 stories that we recommend you have. We just did a little mini version of one, which is the backstory. And typically in every business, the founder-led sales is big, right?
Mm,
Especially in entrepreneurial business, especially in the earlier days of that business, but kind of always, right? The founder story is big. So that's usually the first story, most important founder backstory. The next one we do is called the job story. And so
mm,
the job story is, so we know about Regan. He set up East West Health to do something. What was it set up to do? What's the job? What's the problem it solves, right?
yeah.
Then we do an impact story, which is like a case study. So when you get me off Synthroid and living my most fabulous best self life, I will be a case study, right? Any client that you help get from A to B or even progress on that evolution is an impact story. And you are always writing new impact stories every time you get more success for a client. Every time you get a new client, you have a new impact story to share. What that does is it allows people to see themselves as a client,
Mm,
right? So that's an impact story. And then we have one called a portfolio story, which is kind of like an impact story, but instead of being about a client, it's about a part of your process.
got it.
So it might be like a story around the labs. Like a typical lab looks like this. But when we do it, we add this in, and here's what that tells us, and here's why that's different and really valuable, right? So it's kind of like little case studies or little stories about the unique parts of your process or some component of your process. And then the last one is the most difficult one to do. And the reason it's the most difficult is it's the shortest. So it's really difficult to write a short story, to say something
concise.
And it's called the brand story. And that's like the one sentence, 1 or 2 sentences, we push you to do one that captures all of that magic. And that would be like what's on your website, what you would say in an elevator, etc. So those are like the 5 stories in the story selling framework. And that's one part of our $1 billion blueprint. That's the first part. We work on those stories. And then the rest of it is, how do you get those stories then to do work for you? So you're going to use them in sales. You're going to use them in marketing. You're going to use them in content like this. And how can you take those stories now and make them shape that success that you're looking for?
Man. Well, and just as you're going, talking about your framework, I'm like, there are dozens of stories that connect the dots for so many people, and we would be another hour if I went through all of the stories that I've shared. And I'm like, I don't even realize there's a framework, but I see that when I explain the science of something, people just gloss over and they're like, what in the hell did you just say? And like my nephew was just like, when I was talking to Cade, his brother, my brother, about it, his dad, he was like, it sounds like you guys are saying gobble, 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 gobble. And I was like, oh, that's so true. So, but I noticed when I share it in stories, then people are like, oh, that's what you did for your brain. I want to do that for my brain.
That's right. That's right. And that kind of goes back to, when people sell. So this is all basically sales and marketing. Right. And when people sell, typically they sell features and benefits. They sell features and benefits. If you're in an industry that's highly intellectual, you also tend to get sucked into jargon and industry lingo fast. Like it's very easy. Like when you talk to your brother, he knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
You can say all those terms and scientific things and you're like, yeah, we're speaking the same language. But when you talk to a client, it does not resonate. In the investment industry, that happens a lot too, because the way that fund managers analyze what they're doing or analyze a company, there's tons of acronyms. There's a whole set of Greeks, and they will go into a meeting with an allocator or an investor and just start talking about Greeks. Like, oh, well, what's the theta or whatever the hell. And people are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. This doesn't help me at all. Like I get it that you're smart, but like, you're not speaking a language that I can access. And stories allow you to do that. You still need data. Data tells a story too, but data is like the supporting storyline, and it's story-led, data-backed.
Man. Well, how fascinating. And I love the fact that you have dissected it in the way you have and put it together in a framework that can help other people. Because I think at the core, one of the things that makes you very aspirational, because part of yours is like, oh yeah, and I raised $8 billion and here's how I did it without using numbers. It's like, holy cow. Well, that's just so impressive. But then you actually have taken the time to learn how you did what you did, because nobody trained you on it, which is beautiful. And so
thank you.
And I really appreciate the conversation we've had today, and I appreciate you letting me share my story. That was fun.
Love it.
But what's the best way people can connect with you and engage with you?
Okay, so I'm a big LinkedIn gal. I'm not good at Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. It scares me. But if you want to hang out and chat, you can find me on LinkedIn, Stacy Havener, Havener Capital. I don't know how it'll, just look me up. I'm there. You can also visit stacyhavener.com. And those 2 places are are probably the best. If you happen to be listening and you're in the investment industry, you could certainly check out Havener Capital too.
Beautiful. Well, this has been phenomenal. Any final pieces of wisdom that you'd like to share before we finish up?
I thank you, Regan. This has been so much fun. I think one of my favorite parts about teaching story to people and helping them get in touch with it is that at the beginning of those conversations, they don't really think their story matters. And by the end, they realize how incredibly powerful their story is, often to the point of moving them to tears. Like it becomes a very emotional transformation for them to realize what's inside of them. Their story is so powerful. And I guess I would just say, if you're listening, you have a backstory, you have a story, and it's money.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I think what goes along with it too is as you start sharing your story, you'll appreciate yourself even more. And we all want money to appreciate. And so not only will Stacy help you create more money, but more appreciation, which is
right. Yeah.
A compounding vehicle, I would say. Is that the right terminology?
That's right. You nailed
Look at
it.
that. I got all this financial knowledge all of a sudden.
Yeah, you do. All of a sudden, come on over to the investment world. You'll do fine. You'll do great. Yeah. That's right. It is. It's realizing that, your personal brand is probably your most powerful asset in any business.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
Well, this is exciting, and I'm super honored to be able to get a chance to sit down with you soon, and we'll go through your lab in all the ways. I'll show you how the numbers actually really read, and maybe they're all in the green. That'll be great. But
no, I know they're not. That's why I need you as my guide. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate being here.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. And for those of you who love the show, share it with your friends, family, loved ones, and get the word out. Go to Billion Dollar Backstory, listen to Stacy's podcast, find her on LinkedIn, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. Thanks, everyone, for being part of our community. Love you guys.